Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Carers World Investigates. I'm Tom Magna and I've been out and about gaining an insight into the life of young carers at Christmas.
If it's dangerous weather outside, then mum can't go because it'll hurt her. Just kind of more making sure everything's sorted and helping decorate things generally.
Do you have to wrap your own presents?
Yeah, always have.
Charlie is a 16-year-old young carer from the east of England. She looks after her mother, who's had to have repeated operations over the past 10 years for a complex medical issue, and now faces the fresh diagnosis of a degenerative spine condition. Although life at home has become a little easier lately, as Charlie and her mother have been able to employ cleaners, so there's less housework, nevertheless she continues to support her mum whenever she needs it, from helping her get up and about to emotional support.
My mum's first operation was when I was about 6. Just looking after her after operations and different things like that. My mum's got a spinal condition, so I do different things, like I help tidy up and things like that, but it's kind of changed now that we've got a bit of help. I do chores like tidying up, cleaning, different things like that.
What extra things do you have to do at Christmas?
Just things like shopping and things like that, because it's easier, because if it's dangerous weather outside, then mum can't go because it'll hurt her. Just kind of more making sure everything's sorted and helping decorate things generally.
Do you have to wrap your own presents?
Yeah, always have. We are having our first Christmas home. We'd normally go around my family's, which is a big help because then there's the rest of the family to help look after my mum. But yeah, that's kind of, we just have family help normally. But this year we're doing it by ourselves.
So in the normal year, when it comes to college, how do you manage in those circumstances? And indeed earlier when you were at school?
I didn't really have much of a social life. I was either working or at school or studying and helping out at home, and that's what I really did.
So looking to the future, you may feel you have no political influence. We do have politicians on the programme. What sort of message would you send to those in a position of power who can make decisions? What would you say to them?
Just give more of a chance to people like us, because we don't get the same as everyone else because we're just seen as minorities. But actually there's a fair number of us and we do need extra support. Any like extra help over Christmas, like cleaning, cooking, things like that, just extra activities and other such things.
At age 6, you started being a young carer. You're now still a young carer at 16. How were you identified as a young carer?
My mum kind of pushed me towards the school counsellor, who got me involved in different volunteering things, which then pushed me to get involved with these young caring agencies, and that's where it came from.
And at that point, once other people started to help you, how did you feel? Did you feel a weight had been lifted from you? What sort of feelings did you have at that time?
It was partly that a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but then partly that I didn't deserve it, because it just feels like normal life to me. So it's just, I don't see why I need this help.
In terms of external support, you mentioned Childline. Have you had occasion to call it, for example, and what effect has being able to speak to someone had on you?
I have struggled with mental health over the years, and being able to talk to Childline either through text or calling them does take a weight off your shoulders, and it does give you that chance to just blow some steam off, and it's really helpful that it's open all the time.
And how much of it is it that you're talking to someone who's a stranger effectively to you?
It's good because I feel I have this problem where I feel like people judge me a lot, and so having someone that doesn't know me makes it feel better, because I know that they won't come back and ask me if I'm okay all the time and things like that.
One of the big hurdles that other young carers have told us about is actually, for example, in the case of Childline, just purely using it as an example, that moment when you think, I've got to pick up the phone, I've got to dial the number, no, perhaps I shouldn't. That sort of mental barrier, perhaps. Did you feel any of that about first contacting someone outside?
Yeah, I did. I have always really struggled with expressing my own feelings and things like that. And so my mum actually gave me the number at one point and said, just talk to someone, because I won't talk to her because I know it will upset her knowing how I feel. So talking to someone is difficult for me, but if I can talk to a stranger, then it makes me feel a bit better, yeah.
It also sounds like it makes your mother feel better as well.
Yeah. It definitely takes a weight off her shoulders as well, knowing that I'm actually talking to someone.
Under the pressure of Christmas cheer and commerciality, the festive period can take its toll in unseen ways. These may escape people who are not young carers, as Catherine Bibb from Norfolk Family Carers now explains.
A lot of the young carers we work with, Christmas means actually that they're at home a lot more. There's a lot more pressure in terms of getting the house ready for guests, getting ready for Christmas. It can obviously put a lot of financial strain on the family as well, so it can be quite a challenging time.
In a sense, the official services are always going to have Christmas off, aren't they? So isn't it always about the family through those crucial days?
Again, I think that's another issue that several people face across Christmas, that a lot of services that aren't essentially crisis services aren't open over Christmas. There are different helplines and things available if families do need any support, but yeah, it can be a very isolating time for some.
As an organisation, what sort of things would you like to see the government do for young carers, indeed perhaps for carers in general? In
the last couple of years, and certainly in Norfolk, we've seen a decrease in the level of commissioned services for young carers, so whether that's one-to-one emotional support, group provision, there's less and less being provided by the local council, so it falls to charitable services to find funding to be able to provide those services. I think things like early intervention for young carers is incredibly important, supporting families in those early stages when young carers are identified, so that they're not escalating to having to complete kind of excessive responsibilities, take on a lot of extra responsibility that can really start to impact what they want to do for their own life.
In many respects, we're seeing issues on Carers World Radio Plus suggesting that more funding, more support is getting further and further away, for example, with the carers strategy now effectively non-existent.
I think certainly with charitable bids as well, there's more and more competition these days for charitable grants and funds, so whether it's the big lottery or Children in Need. I know they have an increasing number of applications, again because of the economic climate we're in. There are less and less services being provided by local governments.
So what would you say to young carers listening to this programme over the Christmas period? What sort of message would you send?
I think it can be a very difficult time, especially if they're away from school. Young carers often have a strong support system outside of their home as well. We would encourage young carers that if they have access to the internet, there's certain online forums for young carers that they can access. There's always Childline. Childline is open throughout the holiday period if they need any support or just need someone to listen or have any concerns. And there are services like ours that are running some activities for young carers over the Christmas period as well. So we're really excited to be able to offer that at this time of year.
As always on Carers World Radio Plus, it's our mission to take the stories to the decision makers. First, Labour's Alex Cunningham admits that politicians have a lot of catching up to do when it comes to young carers.
I don't think any of us really understand the whole pressures that are on young people who are also carers, whether that's carer for a sibling or for a parent or another relative. We don't really understand the pressures that are on day to day, never mind, around the Christmas period. So I think we need to start there, understand a lot better what challenges the young people are facing at Christmas time and other special days, to see what can be done. How can we actually help them to have a better Christmas? One idea, off the top of my head is just, how can we link them in with other people for that particular day? Is there a society answer? Would they want a society answer? We need to know what these people need, what they actually want and what they would be comfortable with.
Isn't it inevitable, though, with a Christmas period, no matter if you have very good external support, that external support is probably not going to be there at Christmas? Is it not inevitable that it's going to land in the lap of the family, to be brutally honest?
It does land in the lap of the family, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking for, a wider societal solution to this. I know there are so many organisations doing different things. For example, I know that there's a huge pensioners' party taking place, in the run-up to Christmas, because that's not Christmas Day itself. So we need to be able to work with young people and help them, help us to design the sorts of things that they would like. But you're right, it does fall, right into the bosom of the family in that situation. But some of our young carers, in fact, most of the young carers, almost everyone that I've ever met, they're tremendously resilient. They make the best of some very, very difficult circumstances, and we have to be full of admiration for them. Locally in Stockton, we have the Eastern Ravens Trust, and I've seen young carers who have ended up working for the Young Carers organisation later in life because they understand the issues and things that young people are facing, and perhaps we need to buy in a little bit more to what people like that are saying and thinking as well.
One of the subjects that we've been constantly going on about on Carers World Radio Plus is the carers strategy, over which there was a consultation last year, but nothing's happened since, and now it appears officially it's been kicked into touch and is now going to be part of the Green Paper consultation on social care next summer. Is any sort of official help further away than ever now, do you think?
Well, it would appear so. I mean, it looks as though the government have kicked it well and truly into the long grass. But, we can't just be critical of government. We've got to look wider than that as well, into society. We've got to think in terms of, what are local authorities doing? And locally in Stockton-on-Tees, the Eastern Ravens Trust, they're commissioned to do work by the local authority, and they do that extremely well. But, there is so much more to be done in the carers arena, whether it's a young carer or an older carer. One of the things that I've been looking at as the Shadow Pensions Minister is what could we do for carers in terms of pensions, so that we're trying to look at their life not just in today, but we're actually looking at their lives in the future as well.
One of the things that Norman Lamb for the Lib Dems has spoken about a fair amount on Carers World Radio Plus is the virtue of cross-party work on the subject of not just young carers but carers in general. Do you feel that could hold the key to the future of a sustainable system of support?
I certainly do, because, we all-party parliamentary group, of which I'm a member, it comes together, it discusses issues, it holds inquiries, it listens to what carers have got to say and comes up with very clear recommendations. But of course, recommendations are all well and good from a group of well-meaning cross-party members of parliament. What we need to be able to do is then, get that into legislation, if legislation is needed to deliver the appropriate support or deliver on the recommendations that are made. But, there are people across the House here who have got a tremendous heart for carers, and, they want to do something to help, but often, issues like this are almost sidelined because, the place is too busy to deal with them, and that's extremely frustrating.
Yeah, certainly we've had a bit of a struggle getting people to speak to us because of Brexit. Brexit seems to have taken over the world.
Well, Brexit has taken over the world, most certainly, but, there's so many other just as important, if not more important things. And, when I look at the work that local carers, young carers in particular, do in my own area, I think, we should be, putting people first. And, we need to go on with Brexit, yes, but we also have to remember that there's another world out there. There's a tremendous range of responsibilities that we have as parliamentarians, and we need to find the time to do them.
But there's a starker assessment from Lib Dem former Minister Norman Lamb, who reveals the brutal truth that reflects how many young carers feel about their lives.
Well, the bottom line is we're letting down young carers horribly. The burden that a young carer faces is, I think, often unimaginable, really. It's quite extraordinary what so many youngsters manage to do for a parent or for a sibling, and it has a significant impact on their well-being and on their education, and respite from that is enormously important to give them some balance in their life, and often we expect too much from young people very many children and young people who have a disabled parent or sibling want to play their part, but we should always make sure that it's manageable and that it's not beyond what should properly be expected of a child or young person. And the loss of respite over Christmas is really unacceptable in the extreme, and it's just yet another example of a health and care system that is under impossible pressure. And across the country, families are finding short breaks removed. This is where situations where parents are looking after profoundly disabled youngsters, but we're also seeing examples like the one you describe of a young person having their respite removed, and indeed also very many people finding it impossible to access mental health care. These are the first symptoms of a system under impossible pressure.
In a time when government finances are really being pushed to the limits, there's a lot of talk of Brexit, which seems to distract a lot of politicians from talking about normal everyday issues. Against that sort of background, do we as users of the system, carers, really have a right to be properly supported, or is it simply a matter of adjusting to the fact that we really got to rely on our family?
Well, in a civilized society, we ought to be ensuring that those who need support get it. And I don't think it's beyond the wit of man or woman to design and fund a modern, efficient and effective health and care system that meets people's needs. But we're failing to do that at the moment. And one of the, in a way, the opportunity costs of the whole Brexit process is that capacity within government is completely taken up with the whole Brexit process, and it has no time to address some of the other big challenges we face, such as the state of our health and care system and how we fund a health and care system with an ageing society. So I don't think we should be in a state of mind where we just abandon all hope of achieving a civilized situation. These are political choices, and we must continue to make the case for this sort of provision to be a priority. And indeed, that's why I keep arguing for parties to work together. I coordinated the letter that was referred to on the BBC 2 or 3 weeks ago, which was signed by 90 MPs from across the parties, calling on the Prime Minister to set up a cross-party process, what we're calling an NHS and Care Convention, to engage with the public, with staff in the NHS and the care system, with a view to coming up with a new long-term settlement for the NHS and the care system.
You and I have discussed the subject of the carers strategy on a number of occasions on Carers World Radio Plus. That strategy now seems to have officially disappeared or been incorporated in the Green Paper discussions on social care, and those have been moved now from the autumn through to next summer. Is some sort of help and proper assistance in the civilised society that you speak of, is that even further away now, do you think, than it was maybe 6 months ago or at the time of the election?
Well, it feels like that. And I think one of the problems we have is that for most families getting on with their lives, they perhaps don't really notice the strains that are now there in the system. It's only when someone in the family falls ill and the family discovers that, for example, the cancer waiting time standard is no longer being met in many parts of the country, which puts more people at risk, because we know that early treatment improves outcomes with cancer. It's when people discover that with a disabled mother or father that they can't get the care that they need. It's when a young carer discovers that they can't get respite care. It's only when these sort of crises hit families that you become aware of the unacceptable strain that there is now on the system, but the cumulative effect across our country of so many families now suffering the consequences in one way or another, for me is unacceptable. And we will continue, I and my colleagues from across parties. I'm working together with Liz Kendall, for example, and Sarah Wollaston, who's the Conservative chair of the Health Select Committee, all three of us representing the three parties here. We all share the view that this needs to be confronted, and confronted on a cross-party basis.
Both Alex Cunningham and Norman Lamb managed to fight their way through the political tangle that is Brexit and the EU withdrawal bill currently going through Parliament. Not so lucky the SNP's health spokesperson, Dr. Philippa Whitford. She apologised for not having enough time to speak to me in an interview and expressed her concern about the lack of progress on proper rights for young carers in England. She was, however, able to pass on the following good news to young carers in Scotland, telling me the following. The Scottish Government passed a carers bill last year, which will start coming into effect in April, although it will take until 2020 to roll out its provisions in full. This will provide financial and other support to allow young carers to have access to some of the activities they often miss out on. They'll get a small grant each year to help with the cost of activities and will get a free bus pass to give them mobility. Carers allowance in Scotland is also rising to match job seekers allowance. Of course, the key decision maker is the Conservative-led UK government. On 30th November, I asked the Department of Health, DOH for short, for an interview with Jackie Doyle-Price MP, Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Health, designated as the Minister responsible for care and mental health. Eventually, on 13th December, our bid was turned down. This has been a familiar state of affairs with the DOH since the departure of the Right Honourable Alistair Burt MP as Minister of State in July 2016. Yet again, a bid to interview the Minister has been rejected. Nothing positive in 17 months from the DOH, and all the more poignant that this was a bid on the issue of young carers at Christmas. Some of you may think that this rejection is worthy of a Dickensian act where youth are firmly put in their place. Others may say, what can the Minister do when there are higher priorities for government? So there's really nothing to say. I'll leave you to make up your mind, and do let us know what you think. In the meantime, the Department of Health has issued the following statement, read by one of our production team.
Section 96 of the Children and Families Act 2014 came into effect on the 1st of April 2015. This introduced significant new rights for young carers. All young carers are now entitled to an assessment of their needs for support, regardless of the level or type of care they provide. These new provisions work alongside those in the Care Act 2014 for assessing the needs of adults to enable whole-family approach to assessment and support. This means that when a child is identified as a young carer, the needs of everyone in the family will be considered. This will trigger both children's and adults' support services into action, assessing why a child is caring, what needs to change, and what would help the family to prevent children from taking on this responsibility in the first place. New regulations also set out the considerations that local authorities need to make in carrying out an assessment of young carers' support needs. Additional information jointly published by the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services and the Association of Directors of Children's Services provides further assistance to professionals working with young carers and their families. They are people who may not have a background in children's services. Its aim is to encourage a shared understanding of children's needs, so young carers, the people they care for, and others in their families are provided with effective support. Young carers are this country's unsung heroes, selflessly providing support for the people they love, but their own needs can often be overlooked. That's why we changed the law to help ensure young carers are identified and supported as early as possible, and services are in place to support them.
That's almost it for this edition of Carers World Investigates. If you're experiencing problems as a young carer, please do get in touch. You can email us on news@carersworldradio.com. You can follow Carers World Radio Plus on Twitter and direct message us or contact us via our Facebook page. The last word, though, in this edition featuring young carers at Christmas must go to 16-year-old Charlie, with her reaction to the Health Minister's rejection of our bid to interview her on this vital issue.
I don't see a lot of what is actually in place because we're so overlooked that there isn't the money that there should be to help get awareness for us and give us activities to help us get out of the situation we're in a lot of the time.
So what's your message direct to the Minister?
Just take us into more consideration than they are already, because yeah, they're looking into us, but we need that help. And while there are people in need as well, we're in need as well, and we need to have that support that people don't think that we get or think that we do get, but there's not enough of it.